The gray hymnal.
Actually, the teal hymnal.
Ah, and the teal hymnal.
And we welcome Mr. David Jones this morning, our guest accompanist. Please stand. Hymn 17.
We are building a new way, and every day, a new way. You're working to be free. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. Hate and greed and jealousy. We are working to be free. Feed our every need. We can feed our every need. We can feel our every need. Start with love, that is the seed. We can feed our every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without freedom is our cry. Without these, this world will die. Peace and freedom is our cry. So this is the moment in our service where we share our joys and sorrows. We invite you all to consider if you'd like to share. If you're visiting us for the first time, please feel free to introduce yourself. For those who are gathering in person, we invite you to raise your hand and then stand where you are seated, and I will give you the microphone to share your joy or sorrow. We invite you to share what is in your heart. For those who are joining us online, we invite you to type into the chat your joys and sorrows, and Sally will read them aloud. We invite you to share what is in your heart, too.
Hi. My name is Sally, and I think there are other people there yesterday, like David and Chris, and were you? I don't know. At Maureen and Mike. Yeah. There was a program on the Black Angels, the nurses that served at the tuberculosis hospital at Seaview, and it was just a wonderful program, and it was a joy to see our friend and a fellow member of the congregation, Virginia Allen. She was a star. She got a standing ovation.
I just wanted to piggyback, what Sally talked about with Virginia yesterday. There were a few hundred people there, wonderful panel. It was the author of the book, Black Angels, Maria Smilios, Debbie M. Page, Staten Island historian, the world-famous Virginia Allen. And the panel was so wonderful, not just because it told that story, which needed to be told, because we keep getting reminded all the time that our history has been so erratic and incomplete over the years. And it's really a book about local history on that level, with what was going on at Seaview during, a terrible crisis. And they recruited women of color, nurses, to come up, mostly from the South, to really replace nurses who really didn't want to work with those patients. So we're talking about heroic acts, we're talking about compassion, something we think a lot about, and we're talking about telling the true history and telling true local history.
Thank you, Chris.
Hi, I'm Juliet, and this may seem small, but my mom used to draw and paint, not frequently, but, from time to time. And after her stroke in 2017, her right side was paralyzed and she was right-handed. So she did learn to, kind of write with her left hand, not well. And she didn't really create any art anymore. It was a real loss for her. So yesterday it rained, and Saturdays I spend all day with my mom. And yesterday it rained, so she said, I really don't want to go out. So I brought over some stuff. I brought over stencils and paint and some watercolor crayons, and we created a piece of art together. And it came out really good. She was so happy with the results, and that was something that she said over the years that, anything I draw looks horrible, and she was really negative about any creativity. So it was just so wonderful to create something with her, and it came out great, and we put it up in our house. And I said, we can do this again. Anytime you don't want to go out on a Saturday, I'm happy that we can, collaborate again. So it was just a really wonderful experience to see her be happy in creativity again.
Good morning, I'm Maureen Curran. I was going to say what Sally and Christine already said, but what I would add to the story is that I started reading the book last night, and it's a real page-turner. It was absolutely incredible. I'm so impressed with the writing by Maria Smilios, I think her name is. It was just, the story that, I know Virginia very well, so I know, I had my, the parts of her story that I captured. But the story of the time, of the infectious disease of tuberculosis, of what went on in our country and in the world, I almost couldn't put it down last night. And I almost never read nonfiction, so it says a lot that I could get into a nonfiction book and get really excited. It's just a wonderful book. So I hope, even if you weren't there yesterday, that you have a opportunity to read the book. And I did see online somewhere that I think on October 4th that same panel may be presenting at Wagner College. So maybe we'll put that in the newsletter or something and send it out there. But anyway, that's it. Bye.
Hi, I'm Randy Leeson. As you may or may not know, we're trying to get landmark recognition for our church building. So I've been going through some of the old archives that have been stored up in the parsonage attic for years and years. They used to be in the basement where they got mildewed and wet, so they were taken up there eventually. And I've curated a little exhibit for some of the materials I found. It's in the parish hall on the stage. Things like the church school register from 1962, where I was a member, 98 kids enrolled, which is why in 1968 we determined we were going to build a new building. We purchased land up on off Toad Hill Road, overlooking the spot where the expressway was supposed to go through the cliffs to the Greenbelt. And I have all of these conceptual ideas that the architect put together for a number of different rejected plans for the proposed church, which of course never happened. So, yeah. you know, and other odds and ends like the water bill from the year 1929, $12 for the whole year.
Thank you, Randy.
Thank you. I just wanted to again speak about the event yesterday for the Black Angels. It brought back to me very vivid memories, having lived through that period of segregation in this country in a way that today there is no equivalency for the lives that people of color had to endure during that period of time. Public accommodation is an important component of freedom. And one of the things that people cherish when they come to this country is the freedom. Now, basically, the only freedom you really have is to buy an airplane and fly about. That's still the one freedom that you've got to go here with no restriction, relatively. You don't even have to take shoes off when you're on your own airplane. But it was a beautiful moment yesterday. I recognized most of the people there. I would say that most of the people I knew, and it was quite an event. Almost anybody was there yesterday. It was quite something. I was very moved by it.
I'm Kevin Clark, and I'm happy to announce that my wife Carolyn is having her last chemotherapy treatment this Thursday. So please keep her in your prayers and thoughts, and hopefully this is the end for a while.
Thank you, everybody. I think are we doing a meditation or not? I guess that wasn't included. In any case, we are grateful for all the joys and sorrows we have heard shared in our community and for all those that have gone unspoken. May the attention and care we give each other and those beyond this space remind us that we are not alone.
Today's reading is words written by Betty Jo Middleton. Okay. Today's reading is by Betty Jo Middleton. As we gather here together, may we be attentive one to another. May we listen carefully. May we freely speak. May we be respectful of one another. May we be serious yet not somber. May we be light of heart and full of good cheer. As we gather here together, may we work towards common goals. May we be mindful of our religious community and aware of our responsibilities. May we look into one another's eyes and see ourselves reflected. As we gather here together, may we be attentive to one another and to the task at hand.
Thank you, Sue. We will now take an offering. We know it is the gifts of all of us that help support our ability to thrive and gather. For those attending in person, we invite you to drop your offering into the collection plate. For those online, links and instructions will be posted on the chat. You can mail us a check or donate through the PayPal giving page on our website. Please give us as generously as you can. Our offerings will be gratefully received. And They are changing. Thank you, Kevin. And Bob Dylan.
Please turn now in your great hymnal to number 131, Love Will Guide Us. And please stand and sing along.
Lord will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us, will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through hard night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us, will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night. Wonderful. Now I would like to introduce Sue Flynn, who will be telling us all about the hot topics from General Assembly.
Good morning. My name is Susan Flynn, and my pronouns are she and her. I am currently the treasurer at our church, and for the past 6 years, I have been one of our delegates to the Unitarian Universalist General Assembly that's held once a year, usually in June. General Assembly is under the UUA, which is Unitarian Universalist Association, started in 1962 after the merger in 1961 of Unitarians and Universalists. This was the 62nd year under the UUA banner, and it was held in Pittsburgh. I had been planning to go, but for all kinds of reasons I didn't, so I attended virtually. That's, I guess, one of the upsides of the pandemic was now we can do things multi-platform, so those of us who can't attend in person are able to still feel like we were there. Most of the events that happened at the General Assembly can be actually seen online. You can Google UUGA, and I would say most of the presentations and events are now all available either in a YouTube form or their own video presentations. So I'm just going to go over some of the highlights because I want to spend more time talking about the issue that really took up most of General Assembly this year, and that's changes to the Article 2 of the UUA bylaws. Yes, thank you. Okay, but first off, we have a new president. We elected UUA President Reverend Sofía Betancourt. She was the 10th president of the UUA that was installed. She was, her election was actually uncontested, and with a bit over 95% of the vote, I think the others just abstained, that of the rest of the 100%, voted her in. I've actually seen her, and think some of you who, when we were in New Orleans, she was one of the co-presidents after President Peter Morales resigned, and she was, at that assembly. And I was very impressed when I heard her speak then. And at other events where I've seen her speak, and her opening words that I read are from her, she's always, very mindful and very thoughtful. So I would recommend looking at any of her speeches online to hear her speak them herself. Really, you'd get the better effect of it. So then another event that always happens at General Assembly is voting on actions of immediate witness. They're called AWIs. And basically what AWIs are, they're statements about significant action, events, or development in the world that needs immediate engagement of action by members and congregation groups. AIW does not carry the full authority of Unitarian Universalist Association. Rather, it expresses the concerns of the delegates at the GA at which it was passed. So one of the AIWs that was passed was to protect dreamers and the DACA children for a pathway to permanent residence. So it's calling on us to call on Congress to pass legislation giving them a pathway to permanent residence, and it also calls on UUs to support the Dreamers in their communities. And I think that we have been doing a fair good job of doing that ourselves here in Staten Island. Okay, next was organizing for health equality. And I will read this. Recent attacks against abortion rights, against gender-affirming health care programs, and against very young and very old, combined with the impact of systematic racism, pandemics, poverty, and other problems, bring all nations to a new conversation about health equity and human dignity. Therefore, be it resolved that the General Assembly calls for immediate action. We want individuals to have more control over their bodies. We agree with the World Health Organization that health equality is achieved when everyone can attain their full potential for health and well-being. We know that racism, ageism, homophobia, misogyny, and other forms of systematic oppression prevent many people from enjoying wellness. So, and then another keynote event that happens at General Assembly is the Ware Lecture. It's usually given by some prominent person in the country. It's selected by the UU president, and this year the speaker was Dr. Imani Perry. Dr. Imani Perry is an American interdisciplinary scholar of race, law, literature, African American culture. She's a professor at Princeton University and a contributing writer to The Atlantic. Among her many books are South to America, Breathe, A Letter to My Son, and May We Forever Stand. And just as some people were talking about, the event yesterday that they went to honoring Virginia and talking about untold stories, Dr. Imani Perry actually brings to light the untold stories, and she's, sort of reminding us that there's more than one side to the story, particularly in history. So I'm going to read, because I thought this best summed up, because her lecture was like over an hour long, and I watched it about 3 times online after I saw it when it was live. And I didn't think I could really do justice to summing up what she said, so I found this article that I'm going to actually read from. It was written in the Star King, which is the School for Ministry. It was in their letter in July, in their newsletter rather. Perry's Ware Lecture focused on the stratification of belonging in our country historically and today, and how we need to take seriously and heed the testimonies of those often undervalued, marginalized, and forgotten. Weaving together her personal story and the story of some of our spiritual ancestors, Perry centered these voices and experiences often forgotten in history to highlight important testimonies that call upon our deepest values to act today. She then spoke to what is required of us to answer this call in the current movement, as oppression and violence against people based on their identity has risen to new heights. In the face of people who oppose knowledge and human dignity, who seek to use law and violence to make us cower, as they did back in the day, we have to sustain courage. Courage to read the books, courage to face down the bullies, courage to do our level best to break the unjust laws and refuse them. But we also must have humility. We have to be humble when it comes to testimonies from voices unheeded, both in the past and the present, and this isn't always easy. So again, I commend you to watch, if you can, her lecture. Again, it's available when you look at the UUGA events. And I would imagine, I don't know if any of you have read any of her books, but I know I'm inspired now to get one of her books and read them. So the next big event that happened at General Assembly. Now remember, General Assembly is not just a series of lectures, and there's also the business at hand when we do a lot of voting on things, but there's a lot of workshops that take place. I would say most of the workshops focused on 2 things, and one of them was a proposed business resolution that had to do with wanting to divest the investments that the UA has in the fossil fuel industry. there was two sides to this story that were very interesting, and then I'm going to share my own personal view on this. There is a movement with the young UUs who are very mindful of what's happening in the world with climate change and their concern, and they were very, very passionate about it, and I commend them for that. And they were calling for an immediate divestment. And then there were those saying, well, we can't divest because we have too much invested and the pensions are involved, and you know, and they were really focusing it from their point of view, a practical financial reason why we could not have immediate divestment. But when you speak to other congregations, they've been divesting. They've been divesting for a number of years. So there is this feeling of, well, why is it taking UUA so long to do this? My feeling is, I think we all need to maybe send messages, whether it's an email form or writing form, to the UUA to say, you know, that expression, do something or get off the pot. I really do feel that they've been really dragging their feet on this, and that's something that's unsettling to me, that is taking them so long to do this. So what happened as a result of this, and of course because of confidentiality and a covenant of, you know, when things happen internally, not really telling the whole tale. But the bottom line was someone was actually expelled from GA. Now, in all my knowledge, that's never happened before. So this must have gotten really heated. And I feel really, really bad for the person this happened to, because when someone feels that passionate and committed to a cause, I think we need to be mindful and supportive of them. So I don't know what happened. Most of us don't know what happened. It was not shared with us, and I understand why. But it just goes to show that this is something that's not going away, and we need to really be a little more mindful of how we look at things now in the world in terms of global warming and wastefulness, and using up our resources. So that was, you know, my personal view on that incident. Unfortunately, the proposed business resolution, which this was, did not pass. It was close, but it didn't pass. And I think that's what inspired this incident that happened. There was actually at the final General Assembly meeting a sort of a protest, and again, I felt bad because of how it was done. All of the UU youth and their supporters were standing in the back, and they all got up and they were chanting, you know, and I guess their purpose was to sort of disrupt the meeting. And what happened was everyone just sat quietly. Now, I wasn't there, you know, I'm watching this online. And everyone just sat there quietly, let them do their thing, and then it was over, and then they continued their business. And I just was in shock at that. I thought, you know, it was almost like a slap in the face to those protesters, that it was sort of like, okay, you had your say, you know, now we're going to move on with our business. So again, that was a little unsettling to me, that had happened. Unfortunately, there was no one else from our congregation who saw that with me, but I know in talking to, some of us know her, our dear friend Kathy Kinney, who lives in Dallas, who was a member of this church. She is a delegate from her church also. So we were constantly texting and calling each other over this whole event. And she pretty much felt the same way I did. And in talking with our new minister, Amber, last week, you know, she feels the same way I felt too. So that's interesting. And I know she's going to be speaking somewhere down the road more to that topic also. So now, I don't know if you noticed between the hymns and the readings today, there's a theme going on here. Can anyone guess what that theme is? Kevin knows because I told him. Times are changing, that's right. And I picked out these hymns and the readings with that in mind, because one of the real big issues is a major change to our bylaws, and it had to do with Article 2. Now, Article 2 It's really where we get our principles, the 7 principles that we all know and love, and we've even have a song to go with it. I really didn't realize this either. But this is like those 7 principles are really not the original principles that were in the bylaw. And when you go in the parish hall and you look at Randy's beautiful layout, from what year was those were just Unitarian principles. That was before the merger. And you read them and you notice things change. We evolve. So that in 1961, when Universalists and Unitarians merged, they formed their own set of bylaws. And in those bylaws, they were commissioned that every 15 years, if they so chose, they could review the Article 2 and revise them. So from 1962 or 1961 until 1985, they stayed. And I don't even really have, off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you what they were. But the principles as we know them were not formed until 84 or 85. So they're really not that old. And it was interesting when I was reading this report, and it's a long report, and it's been going on for a number of years. I was surprised at how many people were really, not too happy with this. They're not happy with changing the principles. And I'm beginning to wonder in people that I speak to about this, not everyone, but enough people, I don't think they read this. So it's interesting how people sometimes are afraid of change. I think because of experiences in my own life, I kind of embrace change. When I was a student in graduate school, there was a saying that one of my professors that I never forgot, that crisis begets change. Well, that's one way change happens, but it doesn't always need to be a crisis. It could just be evolving. And in another lecture that I listened to, a minister brought to mind the name of our hymnal, the living tradition. Well, the fact of living is also a way of looking at change, because we do evolve. So I'm not going to go over bit by bit about the Article 2 change. I want you all to actually read this. This is available online. I really want you to read it, because I know that we're going to do a forum to actually go over it bit by bit. What I will do, and I can share with you, and there's enough of you, Kevin, if you want to hand these out, because this is what one of the proposals, it's changed a little bit of what it's going to look like. Basically what they're doing is they are taking the ideology of the 7 principles and putting them into a different format. To me, the format is much more inclusive. And from listening to people, because as I said, we were going over this at GA line by line, who wanted to change the wording, a lot of it was semantics. But while this was happening, it made me have a better appreciation for why they were doing this. And when people got up from other parts of the world, people who grew up from more than just Judeo-Christian backgrounds, talking about now the way this is worded, feeling like now they are part of this, that they're not just sort of and other. Because when we talk about our bases, from Judeo-Christian and other religions, as someone said, when you start making lists, you're always going to leave someone out. So this is a way of not leaving anyone out. So the ideas are the same. In fact, I think they're more enhanced. But I really am asking you to really review this and look at it, because they're going to do a final vote at next year's GA. As a delegate, this church actually is entitled to 2 delegates, so I really hope somebody thinks of becoming a delegate. If someone wants to passionately be a delegate, I will certainly, give up my seat and let someone share it. But they're going to be voting on this for the final version. And I know how I would vote, but I don't want to just be my voice and not the congregation's voice. That's why I felt I wanted to speak about this at a service and also let you know that we will be doing forums, but I want you to be prepared. And actually, the more you read about this, it'll help formulate your opinions. One thing I was also curious was, this church voted to acknowledge the 8th principle, which again was a more inclusive principle dealing with racism and being more inclusive in acknowledging our part in the world of that history. So I was wondering how the people who co-wrote that 8th principle felt about it. Actually, they're very supportive of this. They feel that this really embraces the whole idea of the 8th principle. And again, you can go online and look up, people speaking and addressing that point of view also. So, I don't know if anybody has any questions about. Yes, Rob.
I see that there are 6 here. Are these considered proposed principles?
Well, they're not considered principles, actually. They're called something else. But if you notice, what is the central one? That's the main one. And then the rest just evolve around that. Again, this report really addresses it more eloquently than I can. No one else has a question?
Are you going to take questions later?
I can take questions now.
On the fossil fuel divestment,
Mm-hmm.
what percentage of the UUA portfolio is in fossil fuels?
A lot.
Wow.
Yeah, it's if you read that also, that business proposal, it's 10 pages long. And they address, and they name a lot of our investments. And I was surprised at how much. And I think that's why it kind of annoys me and angers me that it's taking them so long. They're working on it. And actually, after the episode that happened, the UUA actually wrote a letter addressing, not so much the incident, but the proposal. And it was sort of like, yeah, we're working on it and we're doing our best. But I think the real feeling is, but you're not moving fast enough. You really need to, especially since other places have been doing this. And again, when I was going online watching a lot of different sermons from other congregations addressing that. And so many of them were saying, well, in fact, one congregation actually said, well, we divested and our new investments were doing better than when we had our investments in the fossil fuel. So you say, well, then what is taking them so long?
Is there like a finance committee or something? How is it structured? Who makes the decisions?
Well, they have their own, UUA has their own financial advisors and their own financial committee, and they're the ones. So yeah, you wonder, what's taking them so long? Why aren't they doing really the work at hand that we really commended them to do? So, but as I said, if you go online, there's ways to be proactive about this and write to them to let them know. I mean, we as a congregation can write something up, from the board with the congregation's backing, expressing our support of this business draft. And I think the more people that are vocal about it to them, maybe they'll move a little faster. Well, if they do immediate divestment, I think the immediate divestment, let's say like, all right, let's do it tomorrow. I mean, that to me is maybe kind of foolhardy, but I think by now they certainly have had enough time to find other ways to invest the funds. And I think that's the part that frustrates me. And I know the youth are doing it out of concern because it's their future. You know, they're the ones that are going to be around 50 years from now, not me, not the people making those decisions. They're going to be gone. Well, that's the thing, and I think that's the frustration. You know, other people are doing it. What's taking us so long? But again, you know, there is I don't know, I had it amongst all of this, you know, a response from them that they sort of published, you know, maybe a couple of weeks after the General Assembly, you know, and it's sort of, to me, it's a lot of lip service, but that's where we're at with that. Yeah?
You said there's going to be some sort of forum at some point for hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know when it's going?
No. I think Ember and I were talking about doing something like in January. And I think, and part of it is because the UUA has not, the Commission for the Article 2 study, because there were a number of rewrites to this in June, the new report is coming out like sometime soon. It's not out yet, but it should be out before the end of the year, so that this way we'll have a chance to, you know, read the rewrite. But again, it's not that different. I mean, the premise is the same. So if you read this report, the new change, you know, the new wording, it's yeah, it's pretty close. Yes, Sarah.
In the past, we focused our sermon themes around our principles.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's something we could do between now and January.
Yeah.
I went to the Unitarian Church in Annapolis last week. I think it was their second service of the year. And we were looking at Dorothy.
Yeah.
That was what the service was about.
Yeah.
So it might be something that we can think about as a theme for
Yeah, a lot of,
some of our services.
yeah.
Explore what's differences between the principles that we now have and what we have here as language and illustrate what you're saying, that there's not a lot of big changes, that maybe it's just opened up a little broader. Obviously, words are,
Yeah.
Yeah, the UUA actually sent out, you know, guidelines for congregations to actually do services around this with a lot of resources and information. So the reason I didn't focus so much on that today was because, you know, I was really reporting on the GA in general. So I felt that, you know, I wanted to let you know, because usually I do this in July. I just said, you know, what happened at GA. But because, to me, the two issues of the divestment and the Article 2 really took up, I would say, the majority of what the 4 days at GA were. You know, I thought that really needed a whole nother time for itself, and definitely more than one. You're right. So yeah, that would be, you know, interesting to do. And then eventually, you know, at some point, you know, take a vote on how we as a congregation feel about doing this. Mm-hmm.
The people online couldn't hear any of that.
All right, yeah, and it's so brilliant. No, just looking online, if you go on the UUA site, you can easily look at all the varied committees UUA has. One of them is the investment committee. And just so that we understand, like, the inner workings of the organization, that has some oversight of all of our congregations and the denomination. The Board of Trustees of the UUA has full authority and ultimate responsibility for the management and safekeeping of all funds entrusted to it, including funds provided for management to the Investment Committee of the UUA. The committee meets 4 times a year in Boston. If you are interested in attending, please email the committee, and then it kind of goes from there. But if we're trying to understand just the workings of how investments are made, I mean, it really is very much centralized within UUA, within the Board of Trustees, so it's not a varied group of people that are just throwing around ideas. So that means it's also easy to then reach them and talk to them.
We realize that, but because it's so well organized, you know, and it's not just a bunch of people sitting around, what should we do? I think that's where the frustration lies. If these are the professionals, and mere mortals like us can figure out what we should do, why can't they? And again, that's, I think, was the big frustration. So wait, there was just one more thing I wanted to kind of leave you with, if I can find it. Actually, I know where to find it. Okay, I just want to leave you with these words by Hosea Ballou, who was a minister, I don't know how many centuries ago. If we agree in love, there is no disagreement that can do us any injury. But if we do not, no other agreement can do us any good. Let us endeavor to keep the unity in the Spirit in the bonds of peace. Thank you.
Sue, thank you so much for bringing some highlights from the General Assembly to us and pointing out a couple of areas that we as an individual congregation need to look into more closely so we can make our own voices heard. I think at this point we're going to be singing the hymn 1028, The Fire of Commitment. Which is teal hymnal, I think.
Please stand. And this is a fire again. So let's sing it with fire.
Comes a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from here. The fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze. When our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way. Fulfillment and our future can begin. The stories of our living rings a song both brave and clear, calling pilgrim still to witness to the fire of liberty. And the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze. When our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment. days of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. The mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way. The assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. Thank you, everyone. So I invite you now to join me in extinguishing our chalice, and you can find the affirmation in our order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of love, truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. For these we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Our closing words today are taken from Susan Frederick Gray's final presidential report at the 2023 General Assembly. This is no time to go it alone. We belong to each other. We need each other, and we make each other strong and brave. May we continue to nurture resiliency and joy in our spirits and in our communities. May we have courage and clarity to be more effective in protecting our beloved ones, our communities, our neighbors, this planet, and our democracy. May we continue to grow our souls and ourselves, faithfully becoming beloved community.
And now our closing hymn, I believe. End of postlude. So ends our service. Please join us in Parish Hall for hospitality.